Joining us now to discuss is Daniel Turner, the founder and executive director of Power the Future. Daniel, thanks for being here tonight.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Kara.
Great. So you warned in a new statement that because of radicals in the Biden administration, last year was not a record for American energy, but you say it was a record one for Iran. Talk to us about that disparity.
Yeah, right before President Biden was inaugurated, Iran was producing around 900,000 barrels a day. And it was such a low number because of the sanctions the Trump administration had placed on the purchase of Iranian oil. Fast forward to present times, and Iran produces a little over 3 million barrels a day. So that's a huge jump, triple. And when you look at where oil prices are now, which is $85, close to $90 a barrel, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, $280 million a day. Iran is producing. Now, of course, they have to pay off some business interest, right? It's not pure profit, but still, this regime is making tens of millions of dollars a year. And what do regimes like Iran do when they have excess cash, right? They don't build schools for girls. They don't build community centers for religious minorities, right? They fund terrorism. It's what Iran has always done. It's why those sanctions were so important. And as proof of that, in case there's any doubt, it's why there was also silence in the Middle East for 4 years during the Trump administration. It's why you didn't hear about tensions in the Straits of Hormuz or Iran seizing oil tankers, as it's done multiple times before this invasion by Hamas on Israel. So yeah, the Middle East was pretty quiet. And the main reason why it was quiet is because we were outproducing them. And our production numbers kept prices low. And bad guys, when they don't have money, they can't go to war. It's a very simple mathematical equation that seems to escape the Biden administration.
That it does, and I believe purposely so, because it makes them a lot of money to do the whole green energy sham, but also shooting America in the foot when it comes to energy production is also what they want. They don't want America to succeed because, Obama used to talk about you want to fundamentally transform this nation, but you can't do that if the nation works. And people say, well, I like the way things are. So they first have to break all the systems, and then they can say, oh, come to us and we have the solution. Again, they're the ones breaking everything, but then they claim to have the solution to fix it. And it just so happens that quote unquote solution means they get to sit at the top of the pile. So sadly for the left, it's just a win-win for them. And like I say all the time, it's just a lose-lose-lose for us. There's nothing that we gain out of this. And now our nation is at the mercy of so many others. The OPEC cartel, the strategic oil reserve is way down. Do you think that this war now in Israel, like you said, that Hamas is waging against Israel, will that affect gas prices as well as some, you see Saudi Arabia and some of these other nations, they're trying to blame Israel for the attack that happened to them. So do you think that we could see some shifting when it comes to OPEC and gas production?
I think absolutely. Oil is just up around $5 a barrel today alone. And Israel is planning this ground invasion that hasn't even really begun yet. So who knows what's going to happen? Add to that some senators. Lindsey Graham has called for bombing Iranian oil fields. I don't agree with that sentiment, but what would that do to prices? And so you raise a really important point, which is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And the reason why it has been important to our economy is because it has been a hedge in this black swan scenario. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Hurricane season hasn't ended. God forbid it happen, but we could still get a terrible Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf, and that could do damage. So the whole purpose of having 900 million barrels of strategic reserves is so that we can weather any black swan scenario. Well, we're facing a black swan scenario right now, and Biden has diminished almost 80% of the reserves. We're down to 14, 15 days. We're supposed to have 3 months of reserves. This alone should be an impeachable offense because he has weakened American national security. He's put us in a very precarious situation for the sole purpose of trying to save the Senate in 2022. And I'll admit, it worked, right? It worked. He kept the Senate. He kept Schumer as majority leader. But our political victories, the reason of using government resources. There's multiple reasons why Biden and team should be brought up on ethics charges, on impeachment charges. But what he has done to the strategic reserves and the risk he's put our nation in, I think is an impeachable offense.
And also it goes to a point that you were making on Twitter, I guess X they're calling it these days, but I still like to call it Twitter. But as you're pointing out, and this is something that we saw at the very beginning of Biden's time in office, and we're seeing it ebbing and flowing back to that again. But we're almost like reliving the 70s, the worst of the Carter years. I remember when my dad was a kid with the gas lines, gas prices up, stagflation, war in the Middle East. Can you draw some of those parallels again? Because like I said, about a year or two ago, that was the big talk, and I feel like we found ourselves right smack dab in another replay of the 70s that no one asked for.
Yeah, we really are. And if you recall, and if you watch footage of the 1976 presidential debates against 1980 presidential debates against Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter talked about peak oil. He kept talking about how the world knows, the experts agree, we will run out of oil by the year 2000. And so his reason of going green was because there was going to be no oil left. Well, let's fast forward to present day. It seems everywhere we look for oil in America and in our waters, we seem to find it. We have oil and gas and coal reserves for centuries. But we now have a president that's pursuing the same green agenda for different reasons. We have hostages in the Middle East, just like Jimmy Carter did. These hostages have only been there 8 days. Carter's were there 444 days. But we have a strong and growing Iranian threat. We are sending military to the Mediterranean, and pretty soon I'm sure we'll see military in the Persian Gulf. We've got rocket high inflation. We've got rocket high gas prices. And the only good thing about the 70s was that it gave us the Reagan years and stability. And God, it is my sincere prayer that we get the same thing in 2024, because we cannot survive another year of this. We cannot survive another year of not just high prices, high inflation, but a government that lies to us. You know, they came out with the inflation numbers and they told us this was good. And you look at what you spend on groceries because of high energy prices. You look at what you spend on your utility bill because of high energy prices. Right? They lie to us, and a government that continues to lie about energy, about green technology, about COVID, a government that lies to its people is not a country that can survive. And so it is my sincere hope that, like 1980's election, things change in 2024.
You know, like the prayer that you're saying, I think that's the prayer of pretty much all Americans at this point. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us tonight with your astute analysis.